Alan Wake is one of those games that you always hear is just so good and that you have to play it. So I did a few years back, and I liked it well enough, but to be honest, it really didn't stick with me as a whole as much as I'd kind of hoped it would've. Now, upon my decision to replay the game for a review and a bit of a refresher before diving into the sequel, I knew I was in for a strong, campy atmosphere. And for better or for worse though, the rest of the game was pretty much lost on me. How's it going, everyone? My name is Falling Hertz, and today we're of course going to be looking back at Alan Wake. And I want to preface this video now by saying that this will be the first part in probably a 4-episode review series, where next up I want to look at the DLCs for Alan Wake, and then Alan Wake American Nightmare, with Control after that, and then finally kind of coming up with Alan Wake 2, and that will be our RCU review. But coming back around to this video, how I normally do reviews is I want to break the game down into the usual 4 categories: the story, the gameplay, the visuals, and the sound designs. Oh, and to be upfront, I played the original game, not the 2021 remaster for this, but from everything I've seen, it seems to be the ideal way to jump into the game if you're going to go in and play it today and you never have before. I just really wanted to start from the beginning and play that original version to kind of see how it holds up today in a modern lens. But speaking of starting from the beginning, Alan Wake just can't do that, because he's got writer's block. So he and his wife Alice book a nice retreat in the hopes of getting away, or maybe even getting those juices flowing. I'll leave it up to you to decide which of those juices those are. Following a lot of confusing starts and stops in the beginning, you'll eventually settle into the idea that Alice has been taken by an evil entity on your trip to Bright Falls. And this entity, the Darkness as it's usually referred to throughout this, is hoping to have Alan manipulate reality by writing the manuscript for his next book, which mirrors reality in a really interesting way and leans really heavily into that supernatural aspect of the story. I mean, for a pitch, that's absolutely great, right? And because of the delivery of the story being almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, the layers of reveals hit a really interesting dynamic, in my opinion. Alan, for the most part, is in the dark, pun intended. But throughout the story, you'll find one of the best narratively relevant and rewarding collectibles by way of the manuscript pages. In these, you'll either get the written versions of snippets that you've already experienced, or some on-the-nose foreshadowing of what's yet to come. On top of that, there are pages that explain some characters' motivations, and they add even more depth to the plethora of unique, caricature-esque characters, say that 10 times fast, from the obsessive waitress Rose to the charismatic and warm radio host Pat. All in all, I feel like all of the citizens of Bright Falls are really interesting characters, and I think their presence makes the story feel worth it in a way. And I just love the entire setting of Bright Falls, whether it's the atmosphere or anything, but I think that's really crucial to the story of hitting just right. Now, there are other collectibles in the game too. The radio shows that play throughout are a fun listen, and I really like them a lot, and it gives you a good idea of what's going on around the town of Bright Falls while Alan's doing what he does best. Now, the ones I didn't like as much, and I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for this one, were honestly the Night Springs episodes. Don't get me wrong, the mix with live action is really cool, and I like that this is kind of where you can see Remedy getting a bit of their roots with that, but I felt that those added less for the story and only made the pacing feel lesser if you really go about looking for them and then have to sit and watch them. I know that might be a bit of a hot take, but that's just how I felt about those ones specifically. Now, at the end of the day, whether you enjoy interesting and mysterious characters, or a story as deep as an ocean, then I think you'll find something here. The game does end a bit on a cliffhanger, but I am going to play the DLC and I want to see if that continues in any true essence. But otherwise, the twists and turns of the narrative, as well as the really well-layered delivery of the story in and of itself, I have to say, walking away this time around, I feel way more strongly about the atmosphere and the tone that the story strikes. Now, next up we have the gameplay, which is best summed up for me as, it's not a lake, it's a puddle. In Alan Wake, your main struggle is that of managing light and dark, and pretty much your distance from the enemies. There's a serviceable selection of weapons from a handgun, a couple shotguns, a rifle, and even a flare gun. And these feel really good to shoot, in the way that the game feels like it's giving decent enough damage feedback, and the lack of aiming reticle gives it like an all kind of fairly free flow feel that I think was the right call to make for the game that it is. You do also have consumables to use as well, by the way of like flashbangs and flares, And these for the most part are great for your get out of jail free situations. Enemies get too close, you go ahead and pop one of those and they're going to back off, or die, I guess. And as many of you know, you can only use most of the weapons on enemies after you've shined them with some form of light source. Be it aiming at them with a flashlight, turning on a spotlight, or even causing an explosion. There are many ways to handle things like this. The ability to use the environment for certain sections does keep things fresh enough, but the smaller arsenal doesn't do any favors against the game's biggest flaw, in my opinion: enemy variety and overpopulation. There really aren't many enemy types, and outside of like 3 variations of regular people, you've got possessed objects that fling themselves at you, and a group of crows. Wait, I know this one. It's not a group of crows, it's a murder. I even got the script wrong on that one, that's my bad. And it killed me how little gameplay variety there really was when the game started to feel stale in these moments. And that's when you start to notice the issues, too. I want to preface that the Uncharted style of swappable weapons and light combat is a pretty good loop at a base level. I even like the perfect dodge system, but I can't justify this gameplay loop being drawn out as long as it is without any further variation. But as I said, there's things that'll drag you down. For me, the cinematic enemy reveal camera was cool for about the first 10 times, but by like the 69th time, I'm sorry, it was just absolutely annoying. Then once you're out of combat, you try to find solace in the exploration sections. Nope. You get some light platforming sections that suck, even though I didn't have too many issues with them. It's just that Alan feels really, really clunky and weighed down at every step of the way. And then it's a really big thing when you consider that Alan Wake was going to be an open world game once, and that shows its head by way of large open sections that would have been really impressive for the Xbox 360, admittedly. Don't get me wrong, the scale of these environments are cool, but they're very barren and only real buildings call your attention for collectibles. That, and also usually the design points of these environments require you to drive from point A to point B. Then the game continues on the closed path, with no looping or backtracking or any reason to have a big environment to begin with. It just felt like, hey, we already made this, and we need to repurpose it somehow. And worst of all in that section is the driving itself. It doesn't feel terrible, it's actually just well enough that you may trick yourself into thinking that it feels okay. But it doesn't, and I can't be convinced otherwise. And with that, I think the gameplay of Alan Wake is what's aged the absolute poorest. It's a game that clearly had bigger aspirations, and it comes off as lacking focus when like a small gameplay hiccup detracts from an already drawn out experience. Now moving on, let's talk about the visuals. Of course, the game looks better with the remaster, so let's start there for a second. Alan Wake isn't a bad-looking game in motion, but there are featured pre-rendered cutscenes which don't match the game's visual quality at all. A lower resolution, a different color grading, and up-close looks at some not-so-detailed character models don't help at all in these pre-rendered cutscenes. In the remastered version, which I recommend playing, these are all seemingly fixed with updated models to make Alan Wake match closer to what he looks like now, but also I noticed that the lip syncing looks way better. And with that out of the way, I have to say that that was probably my biggest criticism of the game visually speaking, and I can kind of end that with saying that Alan Wake looks great. Well, if you factor in the age of the original release, which is what I played, and honestly, quite frankly, it's still really pretty and unique in design. While individual textures up close show their age and certain surfaces provide no variations, the amount of different objects and clutter around the world is so plentiful, which feeds into the idea that I said earlier of it all looks good in motion, meaning as you're playing the game, there's nothing that really stands out as too underqualified to be there. It all just looks good as you're moving around and doing what you need to do. The environments are varied, from the town to a lonely cabin, the mountain peaks, to an underground mine system. There's plenty of different level designs and uses of color specifically. But my favorite part about the environments are how they feed into the sense of scale of the world as well as where you are by location. What I mean by that is being in an area and seeing the distant mountaintop that you're trying to get to, and then eventually being able to get to that mountaintop and look back to see where you were before is really, really rewarding. It's moments like this that vision of that collective map makes sense for the open world. They really planned out the game world with locations and all placed around where they would need to go for the sake of the story. And it's something like this that makes me wonder if there's ever an Evil Within 3, this is the direction that I hope they take with Crimson City. Now, visually speaking, there's two other aspects that I really want to touch on that I kind of felt a little iffy about. The lighting, and then of course the camera work. So to keep things simple, the camera work in cutscenes is immaculate. It feels like a true cinema director got a hold of the work here. It's inspired, creepy, and just straight up entertaining to watch all the time. The only thing I didn't like about the camera was during the gameplay how far off center it actually gets. Something about the camera placements just don't feel natural, I guess what the, industry standard would be for that. And no matter which angle I switch it to, just none of them feel quite right. Now, as for the lighting, I have to say I'm more excited for the sequel by this game than ever before. For a game where light is paramount to survival, I really can't wait to see that leaned into visually. Alan Wake 1 is definitely less bright in the nighttime, don't get me wrong, but there's never a true darkness in the game where you need the light. I feel like I'm using the light strictly for combat, and never so much to actually need to see and navigate around, if that makes sense. My favorite aspect of using the light sources was actually seeing the iridescent writing, which would reveal a secret cache if you followed all the arrows to where you needed to go, which was a really cool, I guess kind of a collectible, and they always came in clutch when it came to the combat as well. But to not get too crazy with the visual talk of an old game that has a remaster that I didn't play, I think Alan Wake actually ages pretty well if you can get past the look of the cutscenes themselves. The wide variety of locales and environments really does strike up well against the kind of lower resolution textures as you get up close. Overall, coming to an experience that looks really good in motion, but not something that you really want to stand and look at for too long. Now finally, I want to talk a little bit about the sound design, which in my opinion is one of the better aspects of the game if you really sit and think about it. First off, to get the easiest part out of the way, we have the soundtrack. On one hand, you have that super melodramatic nature that you'd get from a Hallmark movie, which is what you imagine Alan Wake's books are probably going to be made into once you get past the initial, hype for his stories. And it sounds really good, and they always bookend all of the cutscenes really well. But on top of that, there's other music within the game as well. Not to go too deep into spoilers, I don't want to go too crazy into it, but there's a couple of elderly rock stars which may or may not have a song in the game, and it's just really awesome, and it's a nice way to create a really cool set piece while also making it a big aspect of the audio design as well. Now I think we can kind of go from that vocal song right onto the actual voice work of the game as well. To me, I think the voices were mostly pretty good. Characters like Pat, the radio host, and Barry, the overbearing manager, were all really good, and whether they needed to feel warming and hospitable or overbearing and pushy, I think everybody did a really good job, and the voice direction I feel for this game was superb. Now where I have to give the absolute flowers of the game is Alan Wake himself. You hear Alan Wake a lot, whether he's narrating what's actually going on during the gameplay, or he's reading one of the manuscript pages that you've picked up as a collectible. There is a lot of Alan Wake speaking within this game, and it's always a treat to hear. I don't know if this is a common thought, but I would really love the voice actor to just go ahead and read any book. Let him read me Harry Potter, I don't care. Let him read me 50 Shades of Grey. That's fine to me. I'll listen to it. And while I don't necessarily require the sound effects for 50 Shades, I definitely did enjoy how they were implemented in Alan Wake. Whether it be some projectile weapon whirling past you as it's thrown at you and you perform a perfect dodge, the little horror stinger as enemies run at you and ambush you from the bushes, or any number of groaning sound effects from the darkness-infested enemies, there's a lot adding into that creepy nature within the gameplay itself. Now on top of that, the footsteps are varied from metal surfaces to dirt surfaces and wooden surfaces anywhere in between, and it really, once again, adds to that sense of place within the world that it makes this game feel almost kind of immersive in the weirdest way possible, that nothing else about it really feels that way. And whether it be the soundtrack, the sound effects, or just the voices in general, you kind of end up with a symphony of the perfect sound for Alan Wake. And all of these years later, I think that's what's going to stick with me the most this time around. And with that, I think I want to hop into a little bit of a final verdict. It's Not a Lake, It's an Ocean refers to Alan Wake 1. As you unravel new lines of mystery left and right in a well-paced mission for collectibles and story beats, you'll see that it just gets deeper and deeper. Unfortunately, with any ocean, there's pollution. This time by way of poorly aged pre-rendered cutscenes and outdated and stale gameplay loops. Thankfully, there's beauty too, in the form of well-directed and executed sound design, with an eerie soundtrack, excellent voice work, and even great sound effects. In the end, Bright Falls is a vacation destination that I recommend because Alan Wake's a fun game that has a really interesting narrative that doesn't overstay its welcome. It's a little longer if you're trying to find all the collectibles, which I think adds the most to the story, so I will say that going in. But I played the game on my Steam Deck. It ran absolutely beautifully. It runs pretty much on every console ever at this point. And really, that's it for me. My name is Falling Hertz. Thank you so much for watching this video. Stay tuned for the DLC review, which probably won't be as long as this one. And then after that, we'll do American Nightmare, which I know literally nothing about. I don't even know if I need to play it, but I kind of want to. I own it, so I might as well. And yeah, then after that, we'll do Control, and then Alan Wake 2, which I'm really excited for, in case you couldn't tell. So thank you so much for watching. Consider subscribing. Helps out a lot. And yeah, goodbye.